Hello people of the internet, my name is Rosie and today I'm going to be talking about books I read in June. I somehow managed to get through 9 books in June. As I've got 9 books, I'm not going to talk about them for too long, I'm just going to power through. The first book on my list is a book that was part of the What Tomorrow May Bring dystopian box set, and that's The Moon Dwellers by David Estes. I hope that's how it's pronounced, I'm sorry if it's not. This is a dystopian, surprise surprise, and it's about a society where everybody lives underground because there was some disaster that happened that made life living on the surface of the planet just impossible. So now everybody lives underground in 3 different realms. There's one called the Sun Realm, the Moon Realm, and the Star Realm. I think that's right. The story is told from 2 different points of view. One of those is Adele, who finds herself in a prison called the Pen. Her parents have been taken away and her little sister is in an orphanage. And it follows her story as she tries to escape and get her family back together. On the other hand, we've got Tristan, who is the son of the president, and as with all dystopian stories, the president and the government are all kind of evil and overbearing, and he's decided he doesn't want to be like that. And it follows them as they do their own thing and as their stories come together. Never mind the cat in the background, he's desperate to get inside the wardrobe, he's got an obsession with it. I don't really know why. Yeah, back to the Moon Dwellers. I really enjoyed this story. It was one I found it a bit slow starting, but once I got into it I couldn't put it down, and I gave this a 4 stars. Don't want to drop that again. I did it last year. It wasn't good. The second book I read this month is a bit confusing because I was given an advanced reader copy of it on NetGalley even though the book had already come out, but I wasn't going to complain. And that's The Geography of You and Me by Jennifer E. Smith. This follows 2 characters, Lucy and Owen, as they meet in an elevator during a blackout. I don't know if it's supposed to be set on the East Coast blackout from the early 2000s or whether it's just another major blackout that affects the whole of the East Coast. It's not just your bog standard romance. These characters are both very well developed and they've both got their own backstory and their own issues to deal with separately, so it isn't just about how these 2 people have a relationship, it's also about the other issues they've got. And I really loved this book. The characters were so well developed, and the author perfectly captured that feeling of wanting to be with somebody but you can't be, and perhaps things aren't working out the way you want them to, and you want it to go in a certain direction but it's not working. I really enjoyed this. I got through it so quickly and I definitely recommend it. I think it's a really nice summer read as well. I gave it a 5 out of 5. The third book I read this month, I can't wave around in your face because I've lent it to my friend to get her hooked on it, and that's The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. I know I'm about a year and a half behind the rest of the world here, but I don't like books that make me cry, so I kind of put off reading this for a while. But because the film was coming out and my mum read it and she really enjoyed it, I decided to give it a go. You probably know what it's about, but if you don't, I'm going to try to explain it and I probably can't do it much justice, but it follows the main character Hazel, who's got terminal lung cancer, and she goes to, well, she's kind of forced to go to a support group with other people in similar situations her age, and she meets a guy called Gus, and it's about their relationship and them dealing with their issues. As you can imagine, it's a sad book, but I think it's dealt with nicely, and it's not depressing. It kind of makes you look at your own life and think. I really enjoyed this book. I think I finished it in a night. I started reading it about 10 o'clock and I stayed up till 2 to finish it. I saw the film last week and loved it. I think it's the only film I've seen where I can say that it truly did the book justice, and I think that's because I read that John Green was on set most days, if not every day. So if you've seen the book, I recommend the film. If you haven't, read the book first, then go see the film. Take tissues. So yeah, I get that a 5 out of 5. The next book I read is another ebook from the What Tomorrow May Bring Cattell dystopia box set, and that's Stitch by Samantha Durante. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I really struggle with this book because all of the books in that box set are dystopians, but this wasn't an obvious dystopian at the start. At the beginning of the book we follow a girl called Alessa who's a college girl, and she sees a ghost and she wants to know who he is and she feels like she's supposed to help him. So the first 2/3 really kind of follow that as she tries to figure out who he is and if she can help him. About 2/3 of the way through there is a big twist and it is shocking. I'm not going to talk about it because it will ruin the book for you. I really like the idea that was explored in that last third of the book. I thought that was much interesting than the first 2/3. because not much really seemed to happen in that. I felt like it was switched the wrong way around. Maybe a third should have been spent on the first half and then 2/3 on the second part. The last third was really interesting. I couldn't put that down, but the first 2/3 I struggled to get to. I wasn't crazy about it, but I think I will pick up the second book because I think the idea explored at the end of the book was interesting, and that I think carries on into the second book, so I think that will be worth a read, but I wasn't mad about this. So I gave this a 2 out of 5. Next up is a book I've already done a written and video review for this month, and that is We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. We Were Liars has only come out in the past few weeks, but it's received such a lot of attention, hype and discussion. It's one of those books that you can't really talk about without ruining it. It's about a family they're very wealthy and they have their own private island, which is where they spend their summer. And at the start, the grandkids all hang out together and you follow the story as they grow up. But then something happens and the rest of We Were Liars explores that. I will link to my separate video review below if you want to watch that. It's quite a shocking book, it's well written, I couldn't put it down. The ending, after thinking about it, I'm a little bit happy with it, so I think I actually now give this 4 out of 5 stars. A physical book. I only read, oh no, that's a lie, I read 3 of these actually this month. Yeah, forget I said that. So I'm pretty late to the Vampire Academy party, but I kind of burnt myself out on vampire stories after reading Twilight a couple of years ago. I ordered this at the beginning of the year. It was in like a £5 for £10 thing off the works. And I knew that I was going to read it at some point, so I thought I may as well have it on my shelf waiting. About halfway through June, I was really feeling the mood for a vampire book, and this was just waiting for me, so I picked it up. This is the first book in the series of the same name, and it's by Rochelle Mead. It's told from the point of view of Rose, a Dampier, is that how it's pronounced? They're guardians of vampires. They're kind of a cross between vampires and humans. Rose is the guardian of her best friend Lisa, who is a Moroi vampire. I think she's the last one of that kind of chain of vampires, and she is going to protect her. Rose and Lissa, whose real name is Vasilissa, which really tickles me because it sounds like Vaseline. It's the small things in life. They are both dragged back to St. Vladimir's Academy, where they ran away from 2 years ago, and the first book follows them as you figure out what happened, they catch up on what's happened since then, and they come under threat. And there's a bit of a whodunit, which I guessed fairly early on. But credit to Rochelle Mead, because even though I knew what was happening, I didn't feel bored, I was still hooked. I really enjoyed this. I read a couple of reviews on Goodreads where people said it was a cross between Twilight and Harry Potter, and I do feel the need to address that because it reminded me of Harry Potter in that it was set in a boarding school. But that was it, really. I mean, you got the relationships between characters and classmates, which was quite interesting. It added an extra something to the book. The only similarity between Vampire Academy and Twilight is that they're about vampires. I really couldn't see any other similarity at all. I really enjoyed this. I did read that the obsession really kind of starts with the second book, Frostbite, so I'm looking forward to reading that. I gave Vampire Academy by Rochelle Mead a 4 out of 5. Some of you book readers may know that there's a whole Summer of Spells thing going on where you either reread Harry Potter or you read it for the first time if you haven't read it. I think it was a video by the Bookables on her 10 favourite Harry Potter characters apart from Harry, Ron and Hermione. I really enjoyed it and it inspired me to pick up the series again. And of course, where do you start with the first one? Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or the Sorcerer's Stone if you're in the US, by J.K. Rowling. A few years ago I used to reread this all the time, but I haven't reread it in probably 5 years now at least. Because one, I lost my copy of this and I couldn't find any bookshops selling the same cover. They'd all got updated ones and that wouldn't match. But I managed to get my hands on this thanks to the interwebs. And secondly, I was kind of worried that I wouldn't love it as much as I used to, because when I think about reading as a kid, this is, this and Swallows and Amazons are at the top of my favourite kids' books list. But I found that I loved it even more. I'd forgotten about so much in this book, and I'd forgotten how funny it was, and I just couldn't put it down. I got through it in a couple of nights, and I'm hoping to get onto the Chamber of Secrets in July. But I'm not going to promise anything, being as I kind of only read one book this month that I said I was going to read in May. So if you haven't read this, oh my god, read it, definitely. If you have read it, give it a reread, why not? Oh. Of course I give this a 5 out of 5, there's no question there. The 8th book I read in June is a sequel to a book I read earlier this year, and I saw the author mention it on Twitter. She said it was free on Amazon Kindle for a limited period of time, so I decided to download it. And that's Embryo, Crosshairs by J.A. Schneider. This is a sequel to Embryo, and I'm not going to talk about this too much because it will ruin the first one completely. All I'm going to say is that it's a medical thriller, it's really gripping. There's some medical terminology in it, but it's explained to you in a way that it doesn't make it confusing at all. You don't feel overwhelmed. It's full of so many twists and turns. Just when you think you know who did it, smack, no. New evidence, it was somebody else. I tore through this in a couple of days and I absolutely loved it, so I have to give it a 5 out of 5, and I'm going to have to get around to reading the 3rd book. The final book I read in June is one I can't say too much about, and annoyingly I haven't got a cover to show you, and that's because it's an ARC and it's not out till the 1st of August, but I really think it deserves talking about very, very, very briefly, and that's Let's Get Lost by A.D.L. Said. I hope that's how it's pronounced, maybe it's outside, I really don't know, I'm sorry. I think that if you're a fan of John Green, you will really enjoy this, and I absolutely love this book. It's out on the 1st of August, and I think it's a really good summer read, and especially if you're going on a road trip. I'll leave the Goodreads links below for all of the books, and I definitely think that one's worth checking out. I read an awful lot of books in June. I really don't know how I did it, and last month I was pretty terrible at actually sticking to reading what I said I was going to read, but I've got 4 books here that I really, really want to read, and I'm quite sure I am going to get through them, so I'm going to quickly waffle about those. The first one is Frostbite by Rochelle Mead. Isn't that just a really, really nice colour? This is obviously the sequel to Vampire Academy, the first book in the series. It follows on from the first book, and everything's on high alert after what happened at the end of the first book, and a winter trip to Idaho has now become mandatory, and I'm sure there's going to be some kind of trouble because it would be boring otherwise. So yeah, I'm going to read that. The next book I'm going to talk about is one I've already started, and that's The Mortal Instruments, City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. I've had this book sitting on my shelf for well over a year now, and I saw a couple of reviews of, is it City of Heavenly Fire, the last book in this series? I've watched reviews of that, even though I've not finished the first, I've even read the first one, and that's what kind of prompted me to pick this up. I've read a couple of chapters so far, and I'm enjoying it. I'm looking forward to seeing where it's going, but I can't stop laughing at this guy on the front cover. I hate it when they put pictures of faces on the front covers because it ruins my idea of what a character looks like, so some people seem to try and get around that by putting headless people on the cover, which always makes me chuckle. I'm quite enjoying this so far, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. Next up is a book I've been hearing about, I think for at least a year now, and I keep meaning to read it, but I was put off because for some reason I thought this was a really massive book like Game of Thrones chunky, but I saw it in Waterstones and I fell in love with the cover, and then when I saw that it wasn't any bigger than any of the books I've mentioned so far, I decided I'd have to pick it up, and that's Burial Rites by Hannah Kent, and look at how pretty that cover is, and black page edges. How cool is that? I'm so easily amused. Burial Rites is about a woman called Agnes, and it's set in northern Iceland, and from what I can remember she's been condemned for murdering her boyfriend, but it's not quite as it seems, so it sounds like it's going to be a really interesting read, and wow, the cover is pretty. The last one, I've been kind of naughty here. This is a book I really wanted to read, and I really intended to read it on Kindle, but I walked into Waterstones and I saw the corner of the book, and I've never seen a physical copy of these books before. I've only ever seen them on Amazon, and I couldn't say no. It's the one by Kira Cass. I couldn't say no to that spine to start with, and that cover is so pretty, but now it means I'm going to have to buy the first 2 in physical copies, even though I've already read them, because my collection won't be complete on my bookshelf. That's really sad, but it's just the way of the book nerd. This is the final instalment in the Selection trilogy, where we find out whether America chooses Prince Max in all aspects, or maybe it's really about whether Prince Maxon chooses America or not. I don't know. I'm so tempted to sneak to the back and have a look, but I'm having to force myself not to. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get through this month, and I have no regrets about buying it, but I'm going to have to buy the first 2 books, the Selection, the Elite, and I didn't really like the Elite, to be honest. I thought it was kind of pointless, so that's a bit annoying, really. So that's what I read in June and what I'm hoping to get through in July, and perhaps I won't ignore it this month, but who knows? I'm not going to force myself to read still. I don't think I've actually picked up Game of Thrones this month. I'm just not feeling in the mood to finish that, so I'm not going to force it on myself because I won't enjoy it. And it's quite a good book. I just struggle to get through them quickly. I hope you've enjoyed me rambling. Please let me know if you've got any recommendations or what you thought of any of those books. If you want to hear me waffle about books more, hit subscribe, or you can follow me on Twitter at EatReadGlam, or you can visit my website eatreadglam.com where I do full book reviews. I also waffle about food, cats and beauty stuff. Before I ramble anymore and waste any more of your time, thanks for watching, have a good day, bye! Woohoo! A physical book! No, it's not the only book. Hold on, I missed one. So I'm kind of late to the Vampire Academy party, but I kind of... what's the word I'm looking for here? Oh god. What's the word? Help. Freaky ghost door. Or perhaps it's actually really about whether Prince Aspen chooses America. Prince Aspen? Oh my god, that'd be cool.